A millionaire father returns from a trip and catches his children asking the neighbor for food. When he discovers that the stepmother was leaving them hungry, he gathers evidence and, in court, turns their pain into justice. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing, the mansion in Regent's Park, an affluent district of London, gleamed under the sunset. Mark Campbell, 45, owner of the country's largest construction company, stepped out of the executive taxi after another international trip. 3 months spent negotiating expansions for Dubai. Exhausted but satisfied. His empire was growing. He paid the fare generously and observed the imposing facade of his residence. High gates, an impeccable garden, ornamental fountains running as if awaiting his return. Before he even rang the doorbell, something caught his attention. In the neighboring house, an older, more modest building, he saw 2 small boys, their backs to him, knocking on the door. He would recognize those silhouettes anywhere, his 7-year-old twin sons Peter and Luke. They were barefoot, dressed in clothes too simple for the mild June weather, and seemed restless. Mark frowned. What were they doing there at Mrs. Nora's house, unsupervised? "Boys?" he called, walking towards them. The twins turned in a start, eyes wide as if they had seen a ghost. For an instant there was hesitation. Then, as if a dam had burst, they ran shouting, "Dad! Dad's back!" When he knelt to hug them, Mark felt every bone under their thin skin. They were lighter, their faces hollow, with deep dark circles under their eyes. His heart raced in panic. "You're so thin!" What happened? The door of the neighboring house opened. Mrs. Nora, 72, a retired teacher who had lived there for decades, appeared with a relieved expression. "Thank goodness you're back, Mr. Campbell. I thought about calling." "But, Mrs. Nora, what's going on? Why are my children here?" "Better come inside," the elderly woman whispered, looking nervously at the mansion next door. Walls have ears. Mrs. Nora's kitchen was the opposite of Mark's house. Small, simple, cozy, smelling of coffee and corn cake. The boys automatically sat at the table, eyes fixed on a platter of bread, cheese, and cake. "You can eat," Mrs. Nora said gently. Mark watched in horror as his sons attacked the food, devouring it as if they hadn't seen food in days. Peter, always the more talkative, swallowed without properly chewing, while Luke trembled trying to hold a piece of bread. "How long has this been going on?" Mark asked, his voice cracking. "They started showing up about 2 months ago." Mrs. Nora lowered her voice. "First it was once a week, then almost every day. Always when your wife goes out to the salon or gym." "Letitia?" Mark mentioned the name of his wife, to whom he had been married for 2 years. "That doesn't make sense. I left more than enough money, a company credit card." "Dad," Luke interrupted, looking at the door as if checking if they were alone. "We can't tell. It's a secret." "What secret, son?" "If we tell, we'll be punished," Peter completed, cheeks full of cake. "Mom, Letitia said you wouldn't believe us anyway." Mark felt his blood run cold. "You can tell me everything. No one will punish you." Between broken whispers, the twins revealed their nightmare. Letitia locked the refrigerator and pantry when Mark traveled. She left only water and occasionally dry bread in their rooms. She said they were too chubby and needed dietary discipline. When they complained of hunger, they were locked in their room. She threatened that if they told their father, they would be sent to a boarding school where crybaby children learn to be men. "I tried to warn you." "Mr. Campbell," Mrs. Nora added, serving him coffee with trembling hands. "I called several times, sent messages. Your wife said you were in important meetings, that you couldn't be disturbed. But on video calls, they seemed fine," Mark murmured, remembering the quick conversations during his trips. "She would get us ready first," Luke explained. "Makeup so we wouldn't look tired. And she said if we said anything, you'd get angry and never come back." Mrs. Nora added, "She maintains a perfect public image. Instagram full of photos of family lunches, all smiling. Anyone looking from the outside?" Mark gripped the cup so tightly that his knuckles whitened. He remembered the doubts that arose in lonely hotel rooms far away. Why did Letitia insist on answering video calls, positioning the boys strategically? Why were the conversations always rushed? Why did his sons seem increasingly quiet? "Mr. Campbell, I know it's none of my business," Mrs. Nora hesitated. "But that woman isn't right. Last week, Luke fainted right here from weakness. I gave him chicken broth, vitamins. I wanted to call a doctor, but they begged me not to. They said it would make everything worse. At that very moment, Mark made a decision. He thanked his neighbor, promised to return later, and took the boys outside. In the car, he broke protocol. Instead of going home, he drove to their favorite restaurant, a simple place with home-cooked food in the neighborhood. "Tonight, we're going to have a proper dinner," he announced, watching his son's eyes light up. During dinner, Mark could barely swallow as he watched his children eat as if it were their first real meal in weeks. How had he not noticed? How had he allowed this to happen? After dinner, he made a call. "Edward." "It's Mark. I need urgent help." "It's about my children." Edward Foster, his lawyer and college friend, listened in silence. Then he was direct. "Don't confront her yet. We need medical reports, evidence, witnesses. Take the boys to a hotel. Tomorrow morning, I'll meet you at Dr. Julia Miller's office, a trusted pediatrician. I'll request a discreet investigation. Documentation first, confrontation later." On the balcony of the five-star hotel, while the twins slept for the first time in months without fear, Mark faced the illuminated city. Hatred mixed with guilt. As a businessman, he had always known how to evaluate people, partners, competitors, employees. How had he failed so terribly with those to whom he entrusted his greatest treasures? Letitia Montgomery Campbell, 34, a former model, a respected socialite in London's elite circles, president of 3 charities for underprivileged children, always impeccably dressed and made up, with a perfect smile in official photos. The woman he had met after becoming a widower, who had promised to love his children as if they were her own. His phone rang. It was her. He took a deep breath and answered with studied normality. "Hi, love. What a surprise. You're back early. We're waiting for you for dinner." Mark felt a chill as he realized the naturalness of that lie. Following Edward's advice, he replied with equal falsity. "I had an unforeseen issue. An emergency meeting came up with Japanese investors. I'll sleep at the office. We'll see each other tomorrow." "The boys will be disappointed," she replied without losing her sweetness. "They miss you so much." He hung up feeling nauseous. He looked into the room where his sons slept clinging to each other, like pups seeking protection. He made a silent promise. No one would hurt his children again, ever. The London morning dawned grey and cold. In the luxurious office of Dr. Julia Miller, a renowned pediatrician in London, the twins waited in silence, holding each other's hands. Mark observed their every move, the way they flinched when someone entered, how they checked the door's position, how they barely touched the snack offered by the receptionist. "I asked for us to be first," Edward Foster explained, entering the private waiting room. "The doctor is already aware of the gravity, but will conduct it without bias. We need an impartial report." Edward, 47, a lawyer specializing in family law, was known for his discretion and effectiveness. Corpulent and with a calm voice, he inspired confidence even in the worst crises. He had met Mark at King's College London before the latter dropped out to take over the family business. "The boys are scared," Mark whispered. "Normal. But this stage is crucial. We can't appear to be fabricating evidence." Dr. Julia entered, a middle-aged woman, grey hair pulled back in a severe bun, impeccable white coat, and a welcoming gaze. She greeted the adults formally, but as she approached the children, her voice changed to a softer tone. "Hello, Peter and Luke. I'm Dr. Julia. Today we're going to chat a little and do some tests to see how you're growing." "Sound good?" The examination was thorough and lengthy. Height, weight, blood pressure, blood collection, reflex assessment, skin and hair analysis, checking for signs of dehydration. Dr. Julia asked questions about diet, sleep, activities, always with professional naturalness, without seeming to be investigating abuse. At one point, she asked to speak with each boy separately, while a nurse discreetly photographed marks and signs on the children's bodies. 2 hours later, in her office, the doctor presented her conclusions to Mark and Edward, while the twins waited in the playroom, supervised. "Clear signs of moderate malnutrition," she began clinically. "They are 7 years old, but their weight and height are compatible with children of 5.5 years. Iron deficiency anemia, deficiencies of B complex, D, and zinc vitamins. The complete blood test will bring more details in 24 hours, but the clinical signs are unmistakable." She showed the development chart, where the twins' lines plummeted in recent months. Most concerning are the indicators of chronic stress, Sleep disturbances, nightmares, recent episodes of nocturnal enuresis. Both show hypervigilant behavior and signs of separation anxiety. Enuresis? They never had that, Mark interrupted, confused. Regression in behaviors, already overcome, is classic in children under severe stress, the doctor explained. Luke presents onychophagia, nail-biting down to the quick, and Peter has developed mild trichotillomania, pulling out strands of hair. See this patch here on his eyebrow, she continued. Relentless in her medical precision, there are signs of prolonged confinement, vitamin D deficiency, typical of those not exposed to the sun. Their musculature is atrophied for their age, indicating restricted movement, and both present small healed lesions on their wrists and ankles, consistent with some type of restraint. Restraint? Mark paled. I cannot state that they were tied up, but the marks are suggestive, she replied professionally. The most revealing was the individual interview. Without inducing answers, I asked them to tell me about their daily meals. Both described patterns of severe food restriction when you were not present. Edward intervened. Doctor, can your report categorically state that there is negligence? Not just negligence, but evident psychological abuse. Children of this age do not invent consistent stories of food deprivation with such specific details. The clinical picture fully corroborates their accounts. Mark covered his face with his hands. Guilt consumed him. I know what you're thinking, the doctor said, softening her tone, but children are resilient. With proper treatment, correct nutrition, and psychological support, they can recover completely. On their way out, Edward led everyone to a discreet restaurant in Chelsea. While the twins ate under Mark's watchful eye, the lawyer laid out the plan. I've already contacted Robert Stone, the best private investigator in London. Former detective, connections in the judiciary, absolute discretion. We need to document everything. Financial records, employee testimonies, photos, recordings. We'll install microcameras in strategic areas of the house. Is that legal? Mark questioned. In your own residence, yes. And considering minors are at risk, any judge will understand the necessity. But we need to act quickly and intelligently. You'll have to go back home and pretend normalcy. Panic seized Mark. I can't leave my children with her again. It's temporary, Edward assured. If you take the children now, she'll notice and destroy evidence. We need to catch her in the act. The cameras will be installed today while you're out. What if she hurts them more while we wait? First niemand said this to us. You'll be there. We'll invent that your project in Dubai was postponed, so you'll be home for a while. Your presence will probably inhibit the most extreme behaviors. And if there's any danger, we'll intervene immediately. Robert Stone arrived, a middle-aged man, ordinary physique, discreetly dressed, the kind of person no one notices in a crowd. His specialty was precisely that, going unnoticed. I have a team ready, he explained, showing photos of the micro-cameras on his tablet. Small as buttons, high definition, motion-activated real-time transmission to secure servers. We'll install them in the kitchen, living room, hallway, and outside the boys' room. We'll avoid bathrooms and the master bedroom for legal reasons, Edward added. We also need detailed financial records. Letitia has access to which accounts? Company credit cards for family expenses, a joint account for the house, access to the boys' custody accounts for education and health, Mark listed. Only then realizing how much control he had given her. We'll do a complete audit, Robert nodded. I'll also track down former employees. If she mistreated your children, she probably mistreated employees. Fired people talk more. What about the legal strategy? Mark asked Edward. For now, we hold back. After the evidence, we'll file for a precautionary restraining order and an emergency request for sole custody. For that, we need irrefutable documentation. The pediatrician is already preparing the report. With it, we'll get a first hearing with the judge. How long? 2 weeks at most. Every day counts to build the case. Mark looked at his sons, who ate silently, still suspicious. What about them? How do I prepare them? With the adapted truth, Edward recommended. Tell them you've noticed something is wrong and you're investigating. That they should act normally. But if there's any problem, they can discreetly let you know. No confrontations with her. Teach them a code, something they can say when they need help. That afternoon, in a private moment in the restaurant garden, Mark knelt in front of his sons. Daddy noticed you haven't been well cared for when I travel, he began directly. That's going to change. We're going back home, but I'll always be around. She'll get angry, Luke whispered. Don't let her know you know, Peter warned his father. She always finds out. Trust me, Mark pleaded, his heart broken by the distrust in his son's eyes. If you need anything, even just a hug or food, say you're missing Grandma. That will be our code. And remember, I won't be traveling anymore for a while. The boys exchanged glances, that silent communication of twins. Promise you won't leave? Luke asked, his voice trembling. I promise on my life. Nothing will separate me from you. As he hugged his sons, Mark envisioned the mansion where they lived, no longer as a symbol of his success, but as a gilded cage where his children suffered. The anger grew, contained only by the strategic need for caution. Soon, Letitia Montgomery Campbell would understand the fatal mistake she had made. The return to the Campbell mansion was a lesson in self-control for Mark. As the car approached the electronic gates, he mentally rehearsed his performance, a casual smile, stories from the trip, hastily bought gifts at the airport. Beside him, the twins were tense, staring straight ahead. Remember, he whispered before they got out of the car. Everything normal. Daddy's here. Letitia appeared at the main door, stunning as always. Perfectly straightened blonde hair, an impeccable designer dress, makeup that enhanced her blue eyes. Her radiant smile, worthy of the magazine covers where she had once appeared as a model, lit up at the sight of her husband. What a wonderful surprise, she exclaimed, embracing Mark with studied enthusiasm. We weren't expecting you today. He smelled her expensive perfume, noticed her freshly manicured nails, the gold watch on her slender wrist. It took all his effort not to push her away in repulsion. Change of plans. The project was postponed, he replied, forcing a smile. I'll be in London for a few weeks. Something imperceptible crossed Letitia's gaze. Concern. But her smile didn't waver. What great news, my love. The boys were dying to see you, weren't they? She turned to the twins, extending her arms. Mark observed how his sons hesitated for a fraction of a second before briefly, unenthusiastically, hugging her. How had he not noticed these signs before? They look so worn out, she commented, stroking Luke's face. I think they caught a cold at school. I've been giving them plenty of soup, vitamins. I stopped by Dr. Julia's earlier today, Mark informed casually. Routine checkup. She recommended supplementation and a reinforced diet. Letitia's smile froze for an instant. A doctor? But I would have taken them, love. You didn't need to bother right after returning from your trip. I wanted to spend some time with them, he replied simply. I missed them a lot. During dinner, hastily prepared by the house cook who seemed surprised by the employer's early return, Mark noticed how Letitia carefully supervised what the boys ate, encouraging them not to overdo it, and reminding them that chubby children have health problems. The performance was subtle, words spoken with sweetness, but whose effect was visible in the way the children ate slowly, asking permission with their eyes before serving themselves again. They can have seconds, Mark intervened, serving more rice onto Peter's plate. The pediatrician said they're underweight. Underweight? Letitia laughed melodiously. She must be exaggerating. Children nowadays are so sedentary. I prefer to keep them healthy. You know how problematic childhood obesity is. That night, while she was showering, Mark discreetly checked his son's room. He discovered the external lock installed on the door, something that had never existed when the house was built. In the closet, he found expensive brand-name clothes, but in a much smaller quantity than he remembered. On the dresser, the toys seemed untouched, as if unused. She keeps the keys in the vanity drawer, Peter whispered, watching his father examine the lock. She only opens it when you call to say you're going to video call. What about the food? There's food in the fridge, but it got locked after we secretly took some, Luke explained, looking nervously at the hallway door. Mark felt his stomach churn. That won't happen again, he promised, hugging his sons. I'll be watching now. In the following days, a tense routine was established in the mansion. Mark announced that he would work from home, setting up a makeshift office near his son's room. Letitia, initially displeased with the change, soon adapted her performance, becoming the perfect wife in his presence, always solicitous, affectionate with the twins when she knew she was being watched. The tablet hidden in the office transmitted images from the micro cameras. During online meetings, Mark kept a small window open, discreetly monitoring. In parallel, he received daily reports from investigator Robert Stone. The first recordings confirmed the nightmare. When Mark left for external meetings, Letitia immediately changed. On one occasion, the kitchen camera captured her locking the refrigerator with a small padlock. On another, she was caught taking only a plate of dry bread and a bottle of water to the boys' room, saying in a cutting voice, "Remember our agreement. If your father asks, say you had a good lunch." Most disturbing was the hallway recording, when she locked the boys in their room, saying, "Stop whining. You're getting too spoiled. You need to learn discipline." The microphone picked up the quiet crying of one of them inside the room, while she calmly left for her Pilates class. The financial reports brought more revelations. While the specific accounts for the boys' food and needs showed minimal expenses, the company credit cards recorded astronomical expenses at spas, luxury restaurants, jewelry stores, and boutiques. More seriously, there were suspicious transfers from the twins' educational accounts to Letitia's personal accounts abroad. "She's siphoning off their future money," Edward stated, examining the documents in a private office meeting. In the last 6 months alone, almost $2 million was transferred to the Cayman Islands. And there's more. She hired an educational consulting company that never provided any service owned by her sister. Robert Stone brought another piece of the puzzle: testimonies from former employees. "I managed to locate the former nanny, Susan Perry," he reported. "She was fired 5 months ago. She's willing to testify that she questioned Mrs. Campbell about the children's restricted diet and was dismissed the same day." Susan's recording was damning. "At first, I thought it was just strictness about healthy eating. Then it turned into something else. The boys couldn't eat without her authorization. If they disobeyed, they went without a snack. Once Luke was so hungry he took cookies secretly. She made him skip dinner as punishment. When I complained, she said I was encouraging disobedience and sent me away without references." The former driver, Joshua Carter, also provided incriminating testimony. "Once, young Peter fainted in the back seat of the car. I was taking them to swimming lessons. Mrs. Campbell said it was a tantrum and told me to continue the trip. When I suggested stopping to buy a snack, she reprimanded me in front of the children. Then she instructed me never to mention the incident to Mr. Campbell. I resigned 2 weeks later." "We are building a solid case," Edward assessed, organizing the evidence in coded folders. The technical evidence, combined with testimonies, medical reports, and financial records, forms a convincing set. Mark, watching another recording, this time Letitia throwing away food the boys had hidden under the bed, questioned, exhausted, "Why does she do this? What kind of monster abuses children like this?" "Classic narcissistic abuser profile," Robert replied. "In society, she's the benefactor, the perfect stepmother who adopted the rich husband's children. At home, a different person. The twins represent competition for attention and resources. The more fragile and dependent they become, the more power she has. And the money," Edward added. "Don't forget she would have control of a considerable fortune as their legal guardian, if something happened to you." The mention made Mark pale. "Do you think—" "I'm not suggesting anything," the lawyer hastened to clarify. "But greedy people make cold calculations." That night, checking on his already sleeping sons, Mark found something that broke his heart: a notebook hidden under the mattress where Luke, in childish handwriting, kept a diary. On the pages, drawings of plates of food, lists of dreamed-of meals, canned phrases repeated like a mantra. "Dad will come back, and hold on a little longer." Swallowing the lump in his throat, Mark made a call. "Edward, no more waiting. We have enough evidence. I want to end this now." "A few more days," the lawyer insisted. "We're almost getting access to the offshore accounts, and the court-appointed social worker can only make the visit next week." Reluctantly, Mark agreed. As he closed the door to his son's room, he didn't notice Letitia watching him from the shadows of the hallway, an inscrutable expression on her perfect face. The next morning, she announced during breakfast, "I've decided to organize a charity lunch here at home this Sunday for the Children's Institute. We need to show our commitment to social causes." Mark noticed something different in her eyes, a calculating determination that worried him. "Great idea," he replied, disguising his concern. The boys can help welcome the guests. Actually, Letitia smiled sweetly, I thought of leaving them with my mother in the countryside. You know how social events are tiring for children. Something in her tone made Mark's internal alarm bells ring. Did she suspect? Was she trying to get the children away? No way, he replied firmly. The boys are staying with me. Letitia's smile didn't reach her eyes. The silent battle was just beginning. The Campbell mansion became a minefield where every word and gesture hid strategies. Letitia, sensing the shift in family dynamics, intensified her public performance while plotting behind the scenes. Mark in turn monitored her every move through the hidden cameras, collecting more evidence for the impending lawsuit. The indirect confrontation began on a Tuesday when Letitia received a call during breakfast. She answered with a smile, but her eyes remained vigilant on Mark. Of course, Deborah. It will be a pleasure to give the interview. The work of the Children's Institute deserves all the visibility. Hanging up, she explained to her husband with excessive enthusiasm, London Socialite News wants a feature on our philanthropic work. They're going to photograph our family at the charity lunch. Isn't that wonderful? Mark nodded mechanically, but his internal alarm sounded. Media exposure was the last thing they needed right now. Can we postpone it? My schedule is complicated, he tried. Impossible, darling. It's for the special anniversary edition. I was so happy I already confirmed. Her smile hid something, Mark was sure. Years of negotiating with business sharks had honed his ability to read people. Confirmation came that night when he checked the day's recordings. As soon as he left for an external meeting, Letitia made another call. Dr. Claudia, this is Letitia Campbell. I'm very worried about my husband. Erratic behavior, increasing paranoia. He thinks I'm mistreating the children. He's installed cameras around the house. Yes, a history of previous exhaustion. No, he never sought treatment. I understand the delicacy, but I fear for the boys' safety. A discreet evaluation? Perfect. Mark showed the recording to Edward the next day in the lawyer's office. She's setting me up, he concluded, furious. She's going to try to paint me as mentally unstable. Classic strategy, Edward analyzed calmly. Discrediting the accuser, when you can't refute the accusations. We need to anticipate our moves. On the same day, confirmation of the suspicions, a judicial notification requesting Mark's psychological evaluation, alleging obsessive and potentially dangerous behavior. The petition, signed by a renowned psychiatrist, mentioned worrying paranoid fixation and history of impulsive decisions under stress. She played the first pawn, Edward commented, studying the document. But she made a strategic error. She forced the opening of the game before having a consolidated position. While they drafted the legal response, Letitia's counterattack gained a new dimension. An article on the London Socialite News website carried the alarming title, Crisis in the Campbell Marriage. Close sources report erratic behavior from the businessman. The text, clearly planted, mentioned reliable sources who had witnessed Mark having episodes of emotional instability and unfounded accusations against his wife, known for her humanitarian work with underprivileged children. Public relations at the service of defamation, observed Robert Stone, presenting his discovery. I tracked the journalist who signed the article. She works for a crisis management agency hired by Letitia 3 days ago. The media war was just beginning. The next morning, a TV station aired a brief note about rumors of a turbulent separation involving one of London's most powerful couples, without mentioning names, but with enough insinuations to identify the Campbells. At home, the atmosphere worsened. Letitia now avoided being alone with Mark, always keeping the twins or staff nearby, creating witnesses for any interaction. At the same time, she intensified public displays of maternal affection, buying expensive gifts for the boys and posting carefully produced photos on social media. She's building an image of a perfect mother for the court, Edward explained, and in parallel, undermining your credibility. The new phase of the confrontation came with an even more worrying notification. Letitia had requested a temporary restraining order, alleging fear for her safety after veiled threats from Mark. The judge, cautious, ordered supervised visitation for the twins until the psychological evaluations of both parents were completed. She wants to distance you from the boys, Edward analyzed. If she succeeds, she'll regain total control over them. We need to act now. The counter-offensive was meticulous. First, a legal response demolishing each allegation with concrete evidence. Edward attached Dr. Julia's report, documenting the twins' malnutrition, formal testimonies from the nanny and driver, and a technical opinion on the suspicious financial transfers. Simultaneously, a respected newspaper published an investigative report on veiled negligence in London's elite circles, without directly mentioning the Campbells, but describing patterns identical to those practiced by Letitia. The journalist Maurice Taylor, a specialist in social investigations, had been carefully supplied with information by Mark's team. The article had a strong impact. In the same week, the program Realities announced a special series on the hidden face of philanthropy, highlighting cases of public figures who cultivated a benevolent image while practicing abuse in their private lives. Cornered by the media, Letitia called a press conference at the Children's Institute. Dressed in sober clothes and without makeup, a clear change from her usual image, she presented herself as a victim of a defamatory campaign. As president of this institution that welcomes hundreds of underprivileged children, I feel obligated to speak out about cruel rumors, she declared, her voice choked. I'm living a nightmare. My husband, a man I have always admired, is facing a moment of imbalance that affects his judgment and threatens our family. With carefully rehearsed tears, she described how she dedicated every minute to being a loving mother to the children she took in as her own, only to be rewarded with absurd accusations. She concluded by appealing for privacy at this delicate time and asking that justice and not the media determine the truth. The performance moved part of the press. In the following hours, headlines were divided between supporters and skeptics. Some celebrities expressed solidarity with Letitia on social media, while family law experts debated the case on TV programs, always preserving the anonymity of those involved, but with enough details for identification. Amidst this turmoil, a crucial figure entered the scene, Fernanda Nunes, the social worker appointed by the judge to assess the family situation and present an independent report. A middle-aged woman, with a serious expression and an analytical gaze, arrived for her first visit on a rainy Thursday. Letitia received her with studied hospitality, tea, biscuits, and a carefully selected family photo album. Mark, guided by Edward, maintained a serene posture, answering questions directly without explicit accusations against his wife. The twins, however, were the key to that visit. Initially shy and withdrawn, they gradually became more comfortable when Fernanda spoke with them alone. The social worker, experienced in abuse cases, noticed how the boys became more expressive and spontaneous in their father's presence, while adopting a defensive and cautious posture near their stepmother. After 3 hours of observation, Fernanda announced that she would return several times in the coming weeks, including surprise visits, and requested access to all medical reports and recordings mentioned in the case. "She's good," Edward commented later. "She noticed the behavioral patterns without us having to point them out." As the official investigation progressed, Letitia intensified her tactics. In another surprising move, she filed for exclusive custody, alleging parental alienation on Mark's part. The extensive and technically sophisticated document described how the businessman was inducing false memories in his sons and fabricating evidence to alienate them from her. The most serious accusation came attached: alleged evidence of domestic violence committed by Mark. Photos showed bruises on Letitia's arm, accompanied by text messages where he supposedly made veiled threats. Gross fabrications, concluded the expert hired by Edward, analyzing the metadata of the images. The photos were taken just 3 days ago, but the bruises appear with different stages of healing in the same sequence. Clearly professional makeup. The messages also did not withstand technical analysis. They had been sent from a cloned number, using techniques that the operator confirmed were incompatible with the usage pattern of Mark's phone. The judicial and media war reached its peak. While experts debated the hypothetical case on TV, the family lived a real nightmare. The twins, confused by the palpable tension and constant changes, began to show new worrying symptoms. Luke developed sudden stuttering, while Peter started wetting the bed every night again. One night, physically and emotionally exhausted, Mark found Luke hidden in the closet, clutching an old teddy bear. Trembling, "What's wrong, son?" he asked, sitting on the floor beside him. "I'm scared we'll have to go with her," the boy whispered. "She said you're crazy, and the judge will make us live only with her." Mark felt his blood run cold. "When did she say that?" "Today, when you were on the phone. She said we're messing up her life, and if we don't behave, she'll send us to a boarding school far away." That conversation was the last straw. The next morning, Mark called Edward, Robert, and Dr. Julia for an urgent meeting. No more waiting. "We're going to request an emergency hearing with a full presentation of the evidence. I want this resolved in a week. Are you prepared for what's coming?" Edward asked. "It will be a public and dirty battle. She has nothing to lose." Mark looked out the window, watching the fine rain falling over London. Somewhere in that city, a judge would decide the fate of his children. "I'm prepared for anything," he replied, "except for another day seeing my children suffer under the same roof as that woman." The central London courthouse commanded respect with its imposing architecture. In courtroom 14 of the family court, the protagonists of that battle awaited the start of the decisive hearing. On one side, Mark Campbell in a discreet suit with a determined expression, flanked by Edward Foster and an elite legal team. On the other, Letitia, strategically dressed in a sober manner, a beige blazer, knee-length skirt, minimal makeup, accompanied by two renowned lawyers specializing in high-profile divorces. The twins were not present. By order of Judge Helen Spencer, known for her strictness and impartiality, they remained under the temporary supervision of Child Protective Services, CPS, to avoid pressure during the hearing. "Remember," Edward whispered to Mark, "she will try to provoke you. Any impulsive reaction will be used to validate the accusations of emotional instability. Stay calm no matter what you hear." Across the room, Letitia leaned in for frequent consultations with her lawyers, occasionally casting victimized glances in Mark's direction. The strategy was evident: to present herself as a fragile and persecuted woman. At precisely 10 a.m., the judge entered the room. A middle-aged black woman with short grey hair, a shrewd gaze, and a presence that commanded immediate respect. "This hearing will address the emergency request for a change of custody of the minors Peter and Luke Campbell," she announced, her voice firm. "Given the serious mutual accusations, I determined that each party present their evidence objectively, without interruption. Witnesses will be heard individually. I will not tolerate theatrics or attempts at emotional manipulation." The first to present his case was Mark, through Edward. The lawyer methodically laid out the evidence, a detailed medical report from Dr. Julia, documenting malnutrition and signs of chronic stress. Financial reports showing the diversion of funds intended for the minors. Formalized testimonies from former employees. When he mentioned the recordings, Letitia's defense immediately protested, alleging invasion of privacy and illegal obtaining of evidence. "Your Honor, the cameras were installed by the homeowner in his own residence, in common areas, for the protection of minors at risk," Edward counter-argued. "There is established jurisprudence allowing such monitoring in cases of suspected abuse." After a brief deliberation, the judge authorized the partial display of the recordings, limited to scenes directly related to the children's care. The images spoke for themselves. Letitia locking the refrigerator, rationing food, confining the twins to their room. Most impactful, a scene where Luke asked for more food and she coldly replied, "You've eaten enough. Keep this up and you'll be fat and useless like you were before." When the lights came on, Letitia's demeanor had changed, the veneer of fragility replaced by a tense expression. Her lawyers immediately sought to disqualify the evidence, claiming the recordings were fragmented and out of context. "My client practices responsible dietary education," argued Dr. Roger Barton, her lead attorney. "The videos only show isolated moments of a consistent educational approach. There is no deprivation, only discipline." Next, they presented reports from a private nutritionist attesting that the twins followed a balanced diet appropriate for their age, completely ignoring the clinical signs of malnutrition documented by Dr. Julia. The central strategy of the defense soon became clear: to characterize Mark as an absentee father who, guilty of neglecting his children for years in favor of his career, was now trying to compensate with fabricated accusations against his dedicated wife. Mr. Campbell spent 197 days away from home last year, Dr. Barton highlighted. While my client sacrificed her career to dedicate herself entirely to raising her stepchildren. Letitia, called to testify, maintained the rehearsed narrative, alternating between calculated firmness and fragility. "I have always prioritized the boys' health," she declared, her voice melodious. "When I met them, they were overweight, ate only fast food, had no routine. I implemented healthy eating, regular schedules, boundaries, things any child needs." Regarding the recordings, she feigned indignation. "My own husband spying on me in my home? That's what they do to criminals, not to wives. If there are compromising videos, they were manipulated or taken out of context." The tension peaked when she presented her central accusation. "Mark is a controlling man who never accepted sharing the upbringing of his children. When he realized the boys were starting to see me as a maternal figure, he felt threatened. The accusations began exactly when I suggested enrolling them in a full-time boarding school to improve social development, something he immediately vetoed." The tactic was clear: to transform a case of negligence into a dispute over parental control, a much more legally ambiguous territory. The turning point began with the witnesses. Mrs. Nora, the elderly neighbor, was the first. With serene dignity, she described the months of observing the twins appearing at her door hungry. "At first I thought it was just childish greed," she recounted. "Then I realized it was real hunger. They arrived trembling, looking back in fear. Once little Luke fainted in my kitchen. I tried to talk to the stepmother, but she always had elegant excuses." Susan, the former nanny, confirmed the pattern. The boys had rationed food. If they ate off schedule, they went without the next meal as punishment. Mrs. Campbell called it dietary discipline, but it was punishment. Joshua, the former driver, reported episodes of fainting and extreme weakness. The boys would doze off from weakness in the back seat. When I suggested stopping for them to eat something, I was reprimanded. The lady said they were whiny and that their father had spoiled them with treats. The most technical and devastating testimony came from Dr. Julia, who detailed the clinical signs inconsistent with responsible dietary education. Severe vitamin deficiencies, anemia, reduced muscle mass, delayed physical development. These are not signs of a healthy diet, but of systematic deprivation, she stated categorically. Allegations of previous overweight are unfounded. I analyzed their complete medical history. The twins were always within the normal range of development until approximately 18 months ago, when they began to show an alarming decline. During a recess, an unexpected event drastically altered the course of the trial. A court officer rushed in, handing a document to the judge. After a quick read, Judge Helen called the lawyers for a private announcement. Upon their return, Edward had an expression of contained triumph. The judge resumed the session with a formal announcement. "This court has just received an emergency report from Child Protective Services. During a surprise visit conducted this morning at the Campbell residence, the counselors found the minor's bedroom locked from the outside, without access to a bathroom, water, or food. The housekeeper informed that she was following explicit orders from Mrs. Letitia Campbell to keep the room locked until further notice." A murmur swept through the room. Letitia visibly paled, while her lawyers frantically tried to consult the new document. The responsible counselor, Dr. Mary Sutton, recorded photographs and the employee's testimony, who confirmed it to be a recurring practice, the judge continued. "This document will be incorporated into the records as additional evidence." The defense's desperate attempt to disqualify the report, alleging irregular procedure, was promptly rejected by the judge. The case, already compromised, completely collapsed when Fernanda Nunes, the social worker, presented her conclusive opinion. After multiple visits, interviews with the minors, staff, and analysis of medical reports, "I found a consistent pattern of negligence and psychological abuse by Mrs. Campbell," she stated. "The children show explicit fear of her, exhibiting mutual protective behavior and clear signs of trauma related to food, hiding food, eating compulsively when they have access, showing anxiety during meals." Her report also highlighted how the twins displayed radically different behavior in the exclusive presence of their father. They become more expressive, spontaneous and secure. The difference is so striking that it strongly suggests a safe emotional environment with the biological parent and a threatening one with the stepmother. Judge Helen's sentence came after a brief recess. With a firm voice and direct gaze, she delivered her decision. In light of the evidence presented, I find a situation of imminent risk to the minors, Peter and Luke Campbell, under the care of Mrs. Letitia Montgomery Campbell. The medical reports, consistent testimonies, financial records, and especially the flagrant violation observed today by Child Protective Services prove a systematic pattern of negligence and abuse. With irrefutable authority, she continued, I order the immediate suspension of joint custody. Provisional custody will be granted exclusively to the father, Mr. Mark Campbell, with supervision from Child Protective Services for an initial period of 6 months. Mrs. Campbell is hereby issued a protective order requiring her to maintain a minimum distance of 500 meters from the minors until the completion of a forensic psychological evaluation. The judge also ordered the opening of a criminal investigation for negligence and abuse and mandated a forensic audit of the accounts designated for the minors, with a preventative freeze on transfers identified as suspicious. Letitia, who had maintained studied composure throughout the hearing, finally lost control. She stood up abruptly, shouting accusations of conspiracy and threatening to appeal to all possible instances. She was restrained by her own lawyers, who escorted her out while trying to minimize the damage to her already compromised public image. Mark remained seated, letting silent tears stream down his face. It wasn't exactly relief or victory he felt. It was the overwhelming weight of realizing the extent of the suffering his children had endured while he believed he was building an empire for them. Is it over? He simply asked Edward. This phase, yes, the lawyer replied. Now begins the process of recovery, for you and especially for the boys. Upon leaving the courthouse, Mark was met by reporters eager for statements about the case that had already become a media sensation. Guided by Edward, he limited himself to saying, Today justice protected 2 innocent boys. Now I ask for respect for our privacy so we can begin our family's healing. On the way to the temporary shelter where the twins awaited, Mark mentally made a promise that would completely change his priorities. He would never again neglect what truly mattered. The reunion at the temporary shelter was a moment of contradictory emotions. The twins, sitting in a colorful room surrounded by untouched toys, looked up simultaneously when Mark entered. For an instant there was hesitation, fear, hope, doubt. Then, as if a floodgate had broken, they ran to their father. Are we going home? Luke asked, his voice small, insecure. Yes, son. To a new home, Mark replied, hugging them carefully as if they might break. The shelter's psychologist, Dr. Patricia Olson, watched the interaction intently. After a few minutes, she approached with a notepad. They are anxious but did not show rejection of the paternal figure, which is very positive, she explained in a professional tone. I strongly recommend regular therapeutic support. Trauma related to food deprivation and confinement can manifest in complex ways in the coming months. Mark nodded, absorbing every word as vital instruction. Did you consider my suggestion not to return to the previous residence? She asked. Yes, I've already arranged another house, smaller, cozier, without bad memories. The new house was in Richmond, a leafy neighborhood, quiet streets near Richmond Park. A single-story house, modern yet welcoming, with a large garden and a small pool. Nothing ostentatious like the previous mansion, but comfortable and designed for children. When they arrived, it was already evening. The twins timidly explored the rooms, like wary animals in new territory. They stopped constantly, looking at their father as if asking permission to continue. It's our home now, Mark explained patiently. You can explore freely. The first meal in the new house was revealing. The cook, Mrs. Mary, an experienced woman specially hired after careful selection, had prepared homemade lasagna, the boys' favorite dish. Mark watched, his heart aching, as Peter discreetly hid a piece wrapped in a napkin in his pocket, while Luke ate slowly, as if fearing someone might take his plate at any moment. There's more on the platter, Mark assured gently, and we can warm it up again if you want seconds later. The boy's eyes widened in surprise. Can we eat after mealtime? Peter asked incredulously. Of course, The food is ours. We eat when we're hungry. That night set the pattern for the following weeks, a continuous rediscovery of what should be normal. The permission to drink water whenever they wanted, open the refrigerator freely, eat fruit between meals, choose clothes, play in the garden, take a leisurely bath. Each small freedom was met with initial astonishment, followed by cautious joy. Following the guidelines of the multidisciplinary team assembled by Edward, Mark implemented a structured but flexible routine. Breakfast together every morning, without exception, a sacred time where they planned the day. Regular school hours, not full time to maximize family time. Lunch lovingly prepared by Mrs. Mary. Afternoons with activities balanced between studies, play, and 3 times a week, therapy. Mark's professional readjustment was equally radical. He moved his central office home, delegated international travel to trusted directors, and restructured business hours to end work promptly at 5 p.m. The construction company continued to grow, but now it orbited around the family, not the other way around. Mrs. Nora, the neighbor who reported the abuse, became a constant presence, a kind of surrogate grandmother who regularly came to teach old recipes to the boys and tell stories of old London. Her apartment in the building next door, discreetly purchased by Mark, ensured she was always nearby. Behind the legal scenes, the battle continued. Letitia aggressively appealed the decision, hiring new lawyers and intensifying a media campaign to portray herself as a victim of conspiracy. However, with the accumulated evidence, each appeal was systematically denied. The criminal investigation slowly advanced, with new witnesses emerging, including current employees of the mansion, now willing to report what they had witnessed. The financial audit revealed even larger diversions than initially identified. In addition to transfers to offshore accounts, a sophisticated scheme was discovered involving shell companies that supposedly provided premium educational and medical services for the twins, but in reality redirected funds to Letitia's personal investments. She planned this from the start, Edward concluded, analyzing the reports. Every move calculated for an eventual separation where she would maintain control of the assets intended for the boys. The journalist Maurice Taylor, who had initially published a tangential report on the case, was now preparing an in-depth investigative series. His team had discovered a similar pattern in Letitia's first marriage to an Edinburgh businessman, a short relationship that ended with accusations of financial appropriation never formally investigated. More surprising was the revelation about the charitable institutions she presided over. An independent audit identified serious inconsistencies, charity events with substantial fundraising, but minimal transfers to the announced beneficiaries. Photographs of supposedly assisted children who, in fact, were not part of the programs. An elaborate facade, Maurice explained when pre-briefing Mark on his findings. She built an impeccable public image while diverting resources. She used the cause of underprivileged children precisely to shield herself from suspicion. Mark refused to participate directly in the media exposure, prioritizing his children's emotional stability. Publish whatever proven truth there is, but leave my children out of it, was his only condition to the journalist. While the outside world processed the growing scandal, in the new home, the delicate work of emotional reconstruction unfolded. Dr. Beatrice Chambers, a child psychologist specializing in trauma, conducted playful sessions where the twins gradually expressed their experiences through drawings, dolls, and metaphorical stories. It's a slow process, she explained to Mark in their weekly meetings. They are processing not only the trauma of deprivation, but the confusion of having been mistreated by someone who was supposed to protect them. The first months were full of challenges. Luke developed recurring nightmares, waking up screaming that he was locked in. Peter exhibited extreme separation anxiety, panicking when his father left even for short periods. Both showed regressive behaviors, infantilized speech, occasional nocturnal accidents, easy crying. The kitchen table became the central point of family recovery. There, every night, Mark established a sacred ritual, dinner without electronic distractions, just conversation. Initially, the boys barely spoke, responding minimally to their father's gentle questions. Over time, they began to share small daily events, then opinions, eventually feelings. Every advance was celebrated, The first day without nightmares. The first spontaneous laugh. The first time Peter didn't cry when left at school. Luke's first request for a second helping without fear. Mark carefully documented each achievement in a diary as a way to not lose perspective on difficult days. 6 months after the move, the progress was visible. Medical examinations confirmed healthy weight and height gain, normalized vitamin levels, significant improvement in anemia. Teachers reported more active participation in class, increasing social interaction with peers, improved concentration. The therapist noted a significant reduction in defensive behaviors and a growing ability to express needs and emotions. The most significant transformation, however, was less measurable. One afternoon during a picnic in Richmond Park, a Sunday program that had become a family tradition, Mark watched his sons play on the grass. For the first time since the nightmare, he saw Peter run without looking back to check if he was being watched. He saw Luke laugh openly while trying to balance on the children's slackline, without fear of appearing happy. "They're becoming children again," commented Mrs. Nora, who was with them. That night, a simple event marked a definitive turning point. During dinner, Luke accidentally knocked over his juice glass. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth. The boy froze, instant terror in his eyes, a conditioned reflex of what would have been severe punishment in the past. Mark simply grabbed a dish towel. "Accidents happen. Shall we clean it together?" The relief on his son's face was followed by something new: trust. For the first time, Luke showed no fear of making a mistake. He helped clean while they talked about other matters. The incident treated as what it truly was, a daily triviality, not a catastrophe. The same weekend, another milestone. Peter asked to invite a classmate to play at home, the first spontaneous act of socialization since the trauma. When the friend arrived, the adults watched in amazement as the boy, previously withdrawn, led the expedition through the backyard, proudly showing off his swing and the treehouse they built together. Healing also came through new passions. Luke discovered a talent for painting, covering canvases with vibrant colors that contrasted with the dark period he had lived. Peter fell in love with soccer, channeling repressed energy into runs across the field. Mark, who had never had time for hobbies, discovered unexpected pleasure in cooking, transforming Saturdays into gastronomic experience days, where they tried new recipes together, celebrating both successes and failures with equal laughter. The judicial cycle finally concluded after an exhausting legal battle. Letitia, who initially maintained considerable support in social circles, found herself progressively isolated as evidence became public. The criminal conviction for abuse and misappropriation resulted in a 4-year sentence under a half-open prison regime, in addition to substantial compensation designated for an educational fund for the twins. To mark the official conclusion of the process and their first year in the new house, Mark organized a small celebration, not an ostentatious party, but a meaningful gathering with everyone who helped on the journey: Mrs. Nora, Edward, Dr. Julia, Fernanda, Robert, Mrs. Mary, the therapist Beatrice, the dedicated teachers, the social worker. In the backyard decorated with soft lights, amidst laughter and relaxed conversations, Mark offered a simple toast: to the courage of the little ones who survived, to the truth which prevailed, and to you who did not look away when you saw children in danger. Later, after the guests left, a new nightly ritual was established. In the cozy library, Mark read stories to his sons, no longer sitting in separate beds, but nestled on the large leather sofa, protected by soft cushions and colorful blankets they called their fort. "Dad," Peter called out sleepily after the final chapter, "do you think we'll really be okay?" Mark observed his sons, fuller cheeks, livelier eyes, more relaxed posture. He saw the small emotional scars they still carried, but also the extraordinary resilience that was blossoming. "We already are," he replied with quiet conviction, day after day. As he carried them, asleep, to their rooms, he reflected on the transformation in his own life. The businessman obsessed with material conquests and global expansion had become a man who measured success in genuine smiles, overcome nightmares and small daily victories. Following a ritual established since the first night in the new house, he checked the windows, adjusted the temperature, filled the water glasses on the bedside tables, left the dinosaur nightlights on with a dim glow. He watched his son sleeping, no longer in a defensive position, curled up but sprawled comfortably, breathing peacefully. Before leaving, he whispered the mantra he repeated every night. They are safe. They are loved. They are home. The family photo album, once filled with artificial poses in luxurious settings, now documented authenticity. Peter covered in mud after a soccer game in the rain, Luke proudly displaying his first finished canvas, the three of them with flour-dusted faces trying to make homemade pizza, kite-flying afternoons in the park, lazy pajama mornings. One night, leafing through this new album, Mark found a drawing hidden between the pages, a joint work by the twins. It showed three figures holding hands in front of a simple house, a bright sun above, and the childish words, "Our real family." The most valuable lesson he had learned on that painful journey crystallized in that simple image. Wealth without love is the most absolute poverty. Protection cannot be outsourced. It demands daily presence, and true happiness does not arrive in a complete package, but in small fragments carefully chosen and preserved day after day.